Cool. So I don't know if Belle's here, but we have to start anyways because we have a lot to get through today. So today we're going to learn everything about the Renaissance era. Okay, there are only, I think, 4 units in it, so we're going to get through that fairly quickly, and then we're going to start with the first 2 units of the Baroque era, and that is basically what we're going to do. But before we get started, okay, so there's a few things I want to do today or say today. First thing, so I know that when I write my content, I use RCC for the Roman Catholic Church, but on the exam, if you're ever writing an essay about the Roman Catholic Church, don't write RCC. I know it's tedious to write out Roman Catholic Church, but just don't do it because I'm pretty sure you'll get points off or like 0.5 off for it. That's just like a really minor thing, but I just don't want you guys losing marks for it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to quiz you guys on the first half of the glossary. So first half, of the definitions of the words. And then we'll talk about page 36, but we're not going to be doing the oral test. We just don't have enough time. Oral, like hearing test. We don't have enough time, and I rather just give you guys like a doc with all the songs and then like share my tips for how I did it on the exam with you guys. So we'll do that later. I don't want to do that right now. But in the meantime, we're waiting for Belle. But I think for the glossary quiz, we can start right now. So basically what I'm going to do is for each person, I'm going to look through the glossary. I'm going to say 2 words, and you have to give me the definition for both of those words, okay? You can use your textbook. You can use your Google Doc. I don't actually know if you are or not, so, but you can use them if they are accessible to you, okay? So does anyone want to go first, or am I just gonna like choose someone? Cool, I'm just going to choose someone. Coco, you're the first on my list. So Coco, I will quiz you first, okay? Okay, Coco? You're going to,
okay.
Yeah, you're going to do it. You're going to tell me the definition. You're not going to type it out. You're going to actually tell me. Okay, did you do the homework? Did you do the first half of the words?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, very good. So can you tell me what the definition of cadenza is?
It's a solo passage found in concertos and arias. I think that's how you say it.
Yep. Is there anything else?
It's either improvised by the soloist or composed in an improvisatory style.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Very good. All right. And next word is a fugue.
It's a structure. I can't like say these words, but
It's
it's
fine.
like a structured, imitative. I can't say that word. It starts with a C.
Contrapuntal.
Yeah, and then composition.
Good. Okay, anything else?
No.
No? Okay, that's basically okay, very good, Coco. Yay. Okay, clearly you did your homework. I'm happy. Okay, next person on my list is Emily. So Emily, let's see. What's the definition of castrato?
It's like a male voice in soprano or alto.
Okay, anything else?
And they used it in the 17th and 18th century for like heroic roles.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Very good. And next, let's get the definition of Ars Nova style.
It's it like, I don't know how to say this, but like it's Latin. It's like Latin for new art, and it was for used in reference to French music of the 14th century. And it involved complexity and melody, harmony, and rhythm.
Yes.
With The use of isorhythm, Hoggett, and musica ficta.
Yes. Okay, awesome, Emily. That's like a very good definition. That's a complete one. Okay, perfect. Very good. So Coco went, Emily went. Next person on my list is Jessie. Okay, Jessie. Jessie, what is the definition of double exposition?
1 second. I'm not sure what is it. So it's like okay. So it's a modified version of sonata form and is usually like used in the first movement. So exposition usually includes the basic the big theme, and then in the tonic key, and then then there's the solo exposition that follows the orchestral one, basically.
Yes. Okay, excellent. Good, Jessie. Okay, and remind me, which page did I say you have to go up to? 150? Right?
Wait, what?
Like for the homework, what was it until page 150 that you had to fill out the definition?
Yes.
Okay, good, because I don't want to quiz you on something you didn't do. Okay, Jessie, next one, what is a lute?
Lute is an instrument in the era, so it's like how you say it? It's a soft. It's like a plucking instrument.
Yes.
And yeah, I see.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. Okay, very good. And the only thing is that it served as an ideal accompaniment to the voice.
Okay.
Yeah. But that is, no, I will accept that as a correct definition. Very good, Jessie. Okay, and Kathleen, you are up next. So Kathleen, first is, what's the definition of figured bass? Figured bass.
A musical shorthand.
Yep.
The numbers are placed below the bass line to show harmonic progression.
Yes. Okay, good. All right, and your next word is, what is chromaticism?
I don't know.
Oh, did you do the homework?
I memorized.
You memorized half of the definitions?
Yeah.
Okay, so chromaticism. Do you know what it is?
No.
No? Okay.
I know it.
Okay, yeah, Jessie, help us.
So I think it is the use of like these notes like outside the key signature, I believe. I think.
That's not chromaticism. Okay, so flip to page 146 of the glossary. It's the second to last word. It starts with the CHROM. Okay, basically what it means, you guys should remember this. This is pretty easy. Have you guys ever played like a chromatic scale? If you have, it means melodies and harmonies that include any of the notes available within the octave in either tonal or modal context. Okay, we'll learn more about it today, so that's fine. Okay, good, Kathleen. That's just one word to remember. Otherwise, awesome, everybody. So we're skipping the oral quiz. Okay, everyone flip your textbook to page 36. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm going to assume that everyone did the homework, everyone filled it out. This was fairly straightforward, okay? But I'm just going to say, does anyone need any help for any of the words? Like they couldn't find a piece that related to it. Anyone?
I have a question.
Yeah,
So for a cappella, can be like basically like any music it was in the era or something.
Yeah, I used Hecdius, the Gregorian chant, and organum. That's what I used, just because obviously they don't have any instruments with them. But so those are like the two main examples. I wouldn't use like dance music or the chanson, just because those ones typically have instruments. But other than that, yeah. Okay, any other words that you guys were a little bit like didn't know, didn't have anything for? No? You guys were able to find everything? Okay, that's awesome. I will take your words for it, or rather your silence for it. And I will, okay, that's basically it for the homework. The only thing I want to do, you guys did like really well on the quiz. Yeah, for your first time, honestly, you guys all passed, which was exciting. But the one question you guys got wrong, or like most people got wrong, was question 14. Which of the following best describes dance music? Okay, I'm going to say this once, but dance music is always secular. Okay, it's never about like God or Jesus. It's always about like fun dancing and like having fun and like secular stuff. Okay, just so you know. So dance music is very secular. Unlike the other ones, it's very secular. Okay, good. So that was the homework check for this week. Obviously, there will be more homework next week, but not as much as this week, just because it's like Christmas and I don't want you guys to be too stressed out. But that being said, let's start with the Renaissance era. This one is pretty straightforward because you guys probably have some sort of knowledge about it, okay? So the Renaissance era, this is just a brief description of what it was. Again, page 38 of the textbook. If you want to read it, feel free, but this is a paragraph version. Basically, what happened in the Renaissance era is they were still listening to the Roman Catholic Church, still writing sacred music, but they were like, okay, religion can't really explain a lot of the things we face in society. So they started turning to science. They were like now, and like math, because math is like quantitative. You can actually prove stuff in a way that like makes sense, right? But like with religion, with like the ideas of religion, some people just didn't understand why people were like thinking that way, and it was very difficult to prove, and you just had to take the Roman Catholic Church's word for it. So they started developing new and more secular ways of thinking, but like we will learn later, this kind of made the church angry, and this is actually an interesting part of the Renaissance, when the church started becoming like angry and started rebelling and started telling people that they were wrong. That's something we'll get into. So yeah, it was just a period of growth in sciences, a little bit less religion, but some of the pieces we will study in the Renaissance are going to be religious. Most are not. Okay, so some things to remember. I highlighted the really important things because what RCM does, and I'm going to say this a lot, but RCM like throws a lot of information in your face, and like 80% of it you just don't need to know, and it's literally just there for like fun, right? Not for fun, but just because RCM feels like being extra. So you have to pick out what's super important, which is what I did here. So it's not important that like the composers created music that reflected the spirit of Renaissance if you don't understand what the spirit of Renaissance is, right? So what I'm going to tell you is elements of musical style. Number one, new harmonic language featured greater use of thirds and sixes, right? Remember in the Middle Ages, they loved perfect chords. Well, now they were starting to move away from that, expanding their chordal reach. Okay, so there was an emergence of tonality towards the end of the era. I'm pretty sure tonality is one of the words in the glossary you will learn, so I won't spend too much time on that. Okay, then imitative counterpoint. So this is important because it complemented the like homorhythmic passages. No, homophonic passages, sorry, getting mixed up here. But we'll learn a little bit more about that later. And just so you know, this is when they started using a little bit less monophonic textures and a little bit more polyphonic textures, just because it sounded better. Very important here, vivid word painting. RCM loves word painting. I just don't know why. They just love the word. I'm pretty sure you learn it in like level 8, but you just have to remember that word painting was a thing, and there's a lot of pieces, well, they'll specifically outline the use of word painting, and that is important to note. Okay, I highlighted this. These are the genres we're going to be studying today. And then, okay, the individual, event, and publication. They almost always quiz you on Franco-Flemish school just because it was important in the Renaissance era. But it's basically, it was a group of musical leaders from France, Belgium, Holland, places like that, who started developing polyphony a little bit more, started developing more contrapuntal styles, especially in like what was like the motet and the mass, which was usually really like set in stone, not many changes. They started changing that, developing contrapuntal style, things like that. And we will learn about one of the people, Josquin de Prez, later on. Alrighty, so let's start with the motet. If you remember not last week, but last class, we did learn about the motet in the Middle Ages, but we'll learn, it's a little bit different for this one here. So the motet, still used for sacred music, okay? That will not change within the motet, but the Renaissance motet compared to the Middle Ages one has a homophonic texture, okay? Which is weird because then they go on to say as a polyphonic texture too. So more homophonic and polyphonic textures rather than monophonic like in the Middle Ages motet. So characteristic features, you can read that if you want, but it's still sacred. That's all you need to know. It's still sacred. It has 4 voices compared to like 3, I think last time. And it's just starting to develop a little more. And yeah, we'll learn a little bit more about it in a few moments. Is there anything else? No, not really. Cantus firmus, still important. The motet was still built on the cantus firmus, which is, if you don't remember, the original chant, the original lines within the chant. But that's about it. I would not only recommend, but tell you guys to read page 40 in more detail, just because I have to go through it quickly, but you should read it and take more notes of it if you feel a need. Okie dokie. So let's learn about the Renaissance motet. I'm going to refer to it as Ave Maria, okay? And if you don't know, Ave Maria, Maria, like I said, is Jesus's mother in the Bible. So a lot of people were praising her because she brought Jesus to life. So they're honoring Jesus. So genre, it's a motet. If you didn't know, that's what we're doing right now. The composer is Mr. Mr. Prez. I'm gonna call him because I don't want to say his first name. Yeah, it was based on a poem. A lot of things are going to be based on a poem. It was a cappella. So sorry. If they ever ask you for an a cappella piece, this motet Ave Maria is most likely it. That's all I want to talk about. The poetic structure, not that important. All right, so page 41 of your textbook, you have building musical vocabulary. You can go through that on your own. If you want to read the translation of the original text, go ahead. I will not go through that with you though. Okay, we're on page 42. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to play like for the first 10 seconds of the piece, just so you understand what it sounds like. It's still creepy because it's still interesting, but you guys can hear it for the first couple of seconds. Okay, so yeah, that's the piece, okay? And when you're looking at page 42 of your textbook, obviously here they gave you the sheet music, but that's not important. You just have to remember the key words for each song, right? Okay, so keywords for this song. Points of imitation is the first one, okay? That's something you're gonna remember. You're gonna have to remember because Renaissance era featured a lot of points of imitation. Okay, there's an example here, the ascending perfect fourth on Ave. So if you want to see, the first note is a G to a C, which is obviously a perfect fourth if you know music. Okay, so that's a point of imitation. It's based on a Gregorian chant fragment. I don't think that's very important in this case. I think what's more important in the opening couplet is a point of imitation. In the first quatrain, the Ave, I'm not going to say that either. There's another paired imitation. Okay, so remember there's a difference between points of imitation and then a paired imitation. Paired imitation is when two voices are like imitating each other or doing like relatively the same thing, but a point of imitation is when it's just one voice doing its own thing and shining like on its own. Okay, so paired imitation, the soprano and the alto, if you don't know, those are the first two voices, and then they're followed by the tenor and the bass. So here, for the first two bars, for the first quatrain, you see the soprano and the alto are together, and then they have rest, and then tenor and bass. Textual clarity achieved, that's not very important, but that is something to mention. Here, final cut. Oh, let me skip ahead. No, you're not going to play. Okay, cool. So there's a little bit more information than what they give you on the textbook here, just because I accessed the RCM virtual class, if that's what you call it. I accessed it so that I got more information, but I'm not going to go through it just because it's not very, very impactful or important. Okay, for the final couplet, there's a homorhythmic texture. What does this mean? All four voices, so the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and the bass, they mostly sing the same rhythm. Okay, if you see here, you can tell it's almost the same rhythm, except in the second bar, it's a little bit different, but other than that, it's pretty much similar. Okay, impact of the words heightened by use of rests, that's not very important. Ends with open fifths. This is just another demonstration that they really like perfect chords in the Middle Ages, but now we're moving on to Renaissance, so they're less obvious. Okay, additional features. The only important thing in the additional features is that the text is syllabic, which means that there's like short emphasis on key words, right? Except if you remember with Hecdius, it was like one word lasted like 5 bars. Here it's a little bit shorter, just so that we achieve textual clarity, which is something that was quite important in the Renaissance era. Alrighty, if there are no questions, if you have any questions, say it in the chat, okay, just because, yeah, that's it. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Mr. Des Prez, and this is like the third composer spotlight we have in RCM, so these will be quite important, just like broadly. Okay, so there's a big paragraph. You don't really need to know their genres and titles, but you need to know that he was part of the Franco-Flemish school. That's super important. Write it down, memorize it. Josquin des Prez, Franco-Flemish school, okay? He mastered contrapuntal techniques. This is something that if they ever talk about Josquin on the exam, they will mention this. Okay, syllabic text setting and then word painting in his motets. So yeah, if they ever talk about this motet and they ask, this is where he demonstrated the most word painting. He was famous during his time, not as famous now. That's about it. And his music is like emotional, but you're gonna learn a lot of emotional music and composers in this unit. Okay, any questions so far? Just say like no in the chat if there are none. No questions? No. Cool. Okay, one person said it. I'll take that as a general consensus. Okay, so unit 2, the mass. Okay, so here RCM got really lazy. Page 45 of the textbook and said just look at page 31 if you want to know about it, which is why I'm not going to go into detail about it. But in the Renaissance era, this is where it differs from the Middle Ages. Composers started using polyphonic settings on five of the movements, to demonstrate like a wide range of contrapuntal techniques. So here's where you see that like the word contrapuntal and just the general contrapuntal style is largely important. Okay, good. So characteristic features. All right. Yeah, so here it evolved from generally 4 voices, like we learned before, to 6 voices. Okay, they started adding way more voices. I highlighted this part in yellow, that secular songs were used as melodic sources for the cantus firmus. Okay, so recall that before it was sacred songs, but now it's starting to be more secular songs, just because that's what they felt like doing, especially when they thought the church was a little bit less important. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Composers often combined imitative counterpoint with homorhythmic passages to create like interesting text settings that were easier to sing, more interesting and more dynamic than previous masses. Yeah, if you want to read that little blurb there at the bottom, you may. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. This is where we learn a little bit about like the ideas of the society in the Renaissance era, right? Because at this point, like they said in the introduction, people were just becoming less and less interested in the church, in the Roman Catholic Church, and rather just wanted to create music, whether it was secular, sacred, instrumental or not, just outside of the church music. They thought, of the church broadly, they thought it was being a little bit too hands-on and wanted too much power. So this is when the Reformation started. Okay, so 16th century Christian movement in Europe led by Martin Luther. Okay, this guy, his name is Martin Luther. Remember, he is the leader of the Reformation. So the Reformation was a religious group, but basically they were saying that we don't think it's okay for the Roman Catholic Church to say that, oh, music cannot have large leaps, music has to be very monophonic, music has to be has a sacred cantus firmus. They didn't like that. They said, we just want music to be freeing. We want to not put such limited boundaries on music, and that's the Reformation's general goal. So they are Christian, led by Martin Luther, and that's basically it. Okay, so now let's talk about Martin Luther. Obviously, leader of the Reformation, leader of the Lutheran Church, things named after him. Okay, he had a 95 thesis or something. I don't think that's very important, but what is important is that his reforms included conducting the service in German instead of Latin. Okay, so he started saying, let's be more inclusive, let's have more languages, let's have let's have more, let's replace like this really simple stuff with like polyphonic settings in the mass, and let's have German monophonic hymn tunes that are like easier to sing, so largely really related to the German language. Obviously, the Catholic Church, when they heard that the Christian Church was starting a reformation like this, they got angry and they're like, hey, that's not right. We still want to have power. Like, why are you taking it away from us? So they started the Counter-Reformation, which is basically the church's attempt of winning back power and winning back, generally political power and authority, and having people still think that the Catholic Church was important. Okay, that's basically it. Let's move on to the Council of Trent. So the Council of Trent is related to the Counter-Reformation, okay? It was basically a bunch of Catholic Church officials, part of the Roman Catholic Church, who said, we want to reaffirm our power, we want to reaffirm our position, and we want to reaffirm the doctrines of Catholicism. There's something in the chat? Nope, cool. Okay, so they basically met up. They're like, how do we ensure that we are always in power, we don't give any power to anyone else, and how do we make sure that music stays exactly as we want it and will never change ever? And they said 5 things, okay? I'm going to gloss through this, but these are actually important. They said that the text should be clear and intelligible. This means that You know, if you ever hear a pop song and they go like fa la la or like na na na, they did not want that at all. They thought that was like horrible. They wanted it to always be like words that made sense and that had meaning. They said the counterpoint should not be overly dense or thick, meaning not too many overlapping lines, not too many large leaps. Like, let's stick to like monophonic and maybe polyphonic if there's like maximum 4 lines. They said instruments, we don't know them, we don't want them, except for the organ. They obviously played favorites with the organ, just because that was like really related to the church, and that's something a lot of people studied in the church. The use of secular cantus firmus was banned. If you remember the piece we literally learned like a few minutes ago, the motet, Ave Maria, that has a secular cantus firmus. They said, we don't want that at all. That's horrible. And then they said displays of virtuosity should be avoided. So anything that's like overly word painting, overly like dramatic, they said absolutely not. That's horrible. We don't want it. Okay, so based on this, let's learn a little bit more about the next piece we will learn, which is a mass. It's called Gloria, okay, and it's by Mr. Giovanni. So Giovanni, I put this little quote here. I thought it was kind of funny because Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina, very religious. He was obviously part of the Counter-Reformation, and he was just absolutely really, really religious. And he wrote secular madrigals in his youth. We'll learn madrigals in a few minutes. But he later blushed and grieved and like profusely apologized for writing secular madrigals when the church like asked him about it, which is so weird. So they basically shamed him for writing like secular madrigals, which is obviously bad, but a little bit funny. Not really, but anyways. So let's talk about Gloria. So it's a polyphonic setting, and so if you look back at the mass, the little chart they give you for the mass, it's one of the parts of the mass ordinary. Okay, so 6 voices, it's a cappella, no instruments, obviously. Gosh, who knows what the church would have done if he used instruments. And basically that is all you need to know. Let's listen to it really quickly. Oops. Okay, so that's all I'm going to play, but obviously, no, stop. If you can hear it, you can hear it's very obviously has religious connotations. It's obviously about God and stuff like that. So if you want, that's actually a really good video to look at because it gives you like the sheet music while it's playing the music. But for now, I'm just going to tell you the key words for this piece. So they only talk about the opening of this piece, which is helpful for us. So the opening is monophonic with, if you heard it, they said like Gloria in excelsis Deo, okay? And when you hear that, that was a monophonic line. It was very clear, very straightforward, no other voices with it. Okay, next part. Yep, then it goes to 6 voices, and I bolded what was really important. So first thing that's really important in excerpt 2.6, which is the top of page 48 on your textbook, is that it has a syllabic and homorhythmic text setting, which makes the words very easy to understand, okay? So everyone's saying the same words for the most part, no overlapping, very straightforward, very syllabic. Next thing is that contrapuntal writing here, if you remember, the Reformation wanted to have like free contrapuntal writing, but because Giovanni was associated with the Counter-Reformation, he had very limited contrapuntal writing. He used very limited and controlled use of imitation, and I wrote like, so no imitation basically, compared to other times. Okay, so then there's melismatic text setting. If you look at page, I'm pretty sure you're definitely going to do this in the glossary because RCM loves the word melismatic, but you will learn about the word melismatic text setting, which is basically there's many notes for a single syllable, okay? And if you look on the word Philly, which is, you can find it if you want to, if you're keen on that, that's an example of word painting, okay? So basically, allowing us to envision something. We don't know what it is. RCM doesn't really tell us, but they just say it is word painting, which means that if they ever ask you which mass has word painting in it, you know it's Gloria by Mr. Giovanni. Okay, there's nothing else here that's very important. Let's talk about Giovanni. Sorry, I had to include a picture of him. I don't really know why. So as I've said before, he was associated with the Counter-Reformation. You guys have to know what the Counter-Reformation was. It was, like I've said, like probably, this is like my third time saying it, he was associated with the Roman Catholic Church who wanted to keep music very limited, very not experimental, and not have any instruments at all. He was very, very spiritual, okay? He was very into the Bible, into God, into things like that. There's nothing really else here that is overly important. You should definitely read it on your own time, make notes on him on your own time, but that's all I'm going to say. Most of his pieces were a cappella, obviously, since he didn't like instruments because the Counter-Reformation didn't, and he largely listened to them. Alrighty, so let's learn now about the madrigal. Okay, madrigal, you guys haven't learned this yet, but it is an interesting piece because for once it's secular, okay? So I think from now on, I could be falsely telling, yeah, from now on, we're not going to be really focusing on sacred music. Yay, we're going to be focusing on secular music, okay? Music with instruments and music that's largely a little bit more lively, in my opinion anyways. Okay. So this is a vocal genre flourished in the late Renaissance. And really it's related to poetry. This is when they saw poetry and they were like, hey, let's make that into a song that like everyone can sing, okay? And the madrigal was largely, this is important, the madrigal was largely the genre, the kinds of pieces that set the stage for opera. So in opera, we're going to learn about that a little bit today too. But madrigal was kind of like the baby opera. No, it wasn't the baby opera. It was, okay, the madrigal walked so the opera could run, basically. Okay, cool. Backgrounds and origins. It was initially homophonic, okay, with focus on bringing pleasure to the performers. Okay, so now it wasn't just about like pleasing the church, pleasing the people. It was like, oh, how about the performers? They look kind of like sad when they're singing. Let's make them happy. Let's find a genre of music that makes them happy. And later it evolved to be more complex polyphonic texture with an increase in chromaticism. Okay, this is where you're going to learn the word chromaticism. Basically, you should remember that. You should learn that word. It's pretty important. Okay, and the last things I will say here is that it had a very virtuosic style, okay? If you don't know, virtuosic means, it means very like extravagant, very out of the box, very different, okay? And in a good way for the most part. Okay, this is like, okay, so the opera is related to the Baroque era, and largely the madrigal included features of the Baroque style of the opera. That is what allowed it to be like the baby for the opera to grow. Okay, characteristic features. I only put two because those are the two most important. So, word painting. First and foremost, that was the most prominent thing, the most important thing. Okay, so there was ideas, images, emotions, paintings. There was what's it called? Stories. Awesome. So the stories were related, were conveyed through the music. So if someone wrote a poem about like, I don't know, being super duper sad, they could create a madrigal around that, and that conveyed that emotion through the music, to the best of their abilities. And then obviously the madrigal, remember that chromaticism is largely related to the madrigal, because if they ever quiz you on that, you should know that. Okay, so Next song. Oh, geez. So next song is Moro Lasso al mio duolo. I expect you to follow along with what I'm saying in the textbook. We're on page 51. So this is by Mr. Carlo Gesualdo. He was an interesting person, very emotional, you know. He murdered his wife and her lover. So, and then I think he killed himself, but that's not important. He was just very emotional. He used chromaticism a lot in his work, which is why I'm really emphasizing it, because it's very important to just this madrigal. It is a cappella, this one, but the next piece we'll learn is not, because we're going to learn 2 madrigals today, by the way, because there's multiple pieces for one genre. First madrigal, a cappella, Italian, by Mr. Carlo Gesualdo. 5 voices. You can hear it if you want. We will listen to it right now. Obviously, page 52, building a musical vocabulary. You are expected to do that on your own time. Okay, and if you could hear this this piece, you can obviously hear and see here, there is a lot of chromaticism here, 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 somewhere here, okay? Yeah, right here. Okay, so that's something to remember. Okay, and Moro Lasso al mio duolo, I did a quick Google Translate of that. It means like my somber lasso from like hell or something like that, which is interesting. And also exemplifies that Mr. Gesualdo was very emotional person. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't mean that. It means I die, alas, in my suffering. Oh, sorry. As if that's much better. But yeah, that's what this piece is about. Okay, let's look at page 53. Let's look at the characteristics of this. First thing, very important. There is a lot of chromaticism, a lot of chromatic parts, okay? So if you don't know what chromaticism is, I'm a little bit worried, or you don't know what a chromatic scale is, I'm a little bit worried, but that is featured in this song. Okay, there's a lot of half steps, creating musical tension and emotional intensity. And obviously, again, chromatic line, it represents death and grief. Okay, so that's a little bit of what he meant to do there. Section 2.8. Okay, this is interesting because in this next section, there is less chromaticism, but there's a contract with more diatonic passages, okay? So that means it's just not chromatic. It's not like semitones. It's a little bit more whole tones and diatonic steps and passages, okay? So that makes it seem a little bit more like energetic. We didn't really listen to that part, but it reflects the energy of life, which is very contrasting with the beginning, which is just about like death and grief. Okay, good. So there's word painting in this, word painting on the word vita, which means life, which is representing the energy of life and things like that. Okay, that's all I have to say about that. Next composer we will learn about is Mr. Carlo, okay? So he was Italian. He was very emotional, as I've said here. Okay, there are 4 things you have to take away from this guy. 1, he was super emotional. 2, he did a lot of word painting, okay? Probably because of the fact that he was emotional. 3, he used a lot of chromaticism, okay? A ton of chromaticism, and then he used a lot of repetition, okay? So emotional, word painting, chromaticism, repetition. Okay, cool. If that is it, we will move on to the last thing we will learn about the madrigal, which is Musica Transalpina. Okay, this is not very important at all. I don't even think they'll quiz you on it, but in case they do, it means it's just a bunch of Italian madrigals that they found in England, and then they just put it together and called it Musica Transalpina, which means music beyond the Alps. Not very important, not much I have to say about that. Okay, second madrigal we will learn today is My Bonnie Lass She Smileth. Okay, this is the more lively madrigal, I hope. Okay, so this one is by an English composer, as you can tell by his name, Thomas Morley. I can pronounce it, so it's most likely English at this point. My Bonnie Lass She Smileth. It's about someone smiling, I'm guessing. Okay, so it's an English madrigal. The word ballet here, you can, it'll come up later. Yeah, it's in the musical vocabulary. And basically, this is again a cappella, but the one thing important about this is that there are nonsense syllables, and you will most likely hear them, or I'll play it long enough for you to hear them. But instead of like all the words having like a meaning, like my Bonnie Lass She Smileth, some of them just say fa la 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 la, right? And those don't have any inherent meaning, but they're just there for fun. Okay, good. So is there anything else? You can look at the background information. It's in English. There's 5 voices and it's strophic form. Okay, this is kind of important. Strophic form, meaning it goes A, B, B with each stanza. Okie dokie, so let's listen to this a little bit. Yeah. So this is obviously not a long song. If you want to play it on your own, you should, 100%. But the only thing here is that if you guys heard for like longer than they said actual words, they just said fa la 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 la, which are nonsense syllables. Oh God, this is loud. Okay, let me skip ahead. Okay, cool. So section A. You don't really need to look at the sheet music, but page 55, section A, it's in duple meter. Okay. So contrary to a lot of the other pieces we learned, it's not in triple meter, it's in duple meter, meaning it's a division. You can divide it by 2. It's very lively and lighthearted. If you heard it, I was really surprised the first time I heard it because I was so used to hearing such sad songs. This one's kind of upbeat. And there was a piano in this one. There's no piano in the original version, but they just added it because it's a choir. Okay, so there's nonsense syllables here on the fa la 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 refrains, okay? And it's largely syllabic text setting. Okay, so all this information, you should be jotting it down. Do it on your own time. I will not go into it for too much. Okay, page 56, section B. Okay, not much here. They switch from duple to triple meter here. If you can see page 56, the second bar, they go to 3/4. That's all that's very important. And then the same music is repeated the second time around. Okay, that's basically it. So here, what I put, this one, not very long. I don't even know if it's very important, but listen to it regardless. The really important things are that, number 1, there are nonsense syllables in it, and number 2, it's in strophic form. Okay, so let's see. Okay, let's learn a little bit more about Thomas Morley. Okay, yes, there is important stuff about him. So Thomas, he was English, okay, and he did a lot of things. He was composer, obviously, he was a music publisher. He did a lot of stuff. Here, what's super important is that what he demonstrated with his writing, right? So he demonstrated homorhythmic and contrapuntal textures, which is associated with the Reformation, right? He used a lot of nonsense syllables, as you can tell, fa la 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 la, those are nonsense syllables, easily singable melodic lines, right? So here, it's super easy to just sing fa la 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 and follow along with what he's saying. And generally lighthearted songs. like if you go back to what we learned a few minutes ago with Mr. Giovanni, he obviously liked to write about, no, was it Giovanni? No, it was Mr. Carlo Gesualdo. He wrote about death and like how he doesn't like his life, right? But Thomas Morley, he writes a little bit more lighthearted stuff, a little bit of a happier person. And the last thing I will say is that he wrote a lot of stuff that is found in the Fitzwilliam Virginal book. We will learn that in a moment, but that was pretty important. And he was also influenced by William Byrd. William Byrd. Okay, I'm going to call him William Byrd. He was influenced by him in his sacred vocal works, but obviously now we're focusing more on secular songs. Okie dokie. So I just put a lot of information in your brains right then and there. Does anyone have any questions, or do we want to just continue? Put it in the chat. Anything? No? No questions? Continue? Okay, cool. So if I'm ever going too fast, just let me know. We have a lot to cover and I want to make sure you guys know what is happening. Okay, last but not least, we have keyboard music. Wait, may I please go? Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm not going to like stop you from going to the washroom. It's your house, obviously. Let's see. Sorry, no, don't apologize. Just go to the washroom. You'll have this slide after class anyway, so if you miss anything, you'll have access to it at the very least. Okay, so we're on page 58, unit 4, keyboard music, last unit for the Renaissance era, okay? And I'll talk very briefly about it and what happened, but I'll focus more on the Fitzwilliam Virginal book because that's what's very important. So largely keyboard music, so the Renaissance era is associated with vocal music because the instruments were still being developed. So they weren't fully happy with how the instruments looked, how they sounded, how they were used, and they're still in the development stages of those instruments, okay? Yeah, the organ demonstrated this. That's basically it. Yeah, the rest of this, not really important, but with the instruments, the organ was a favorite, but other string instruments were also kind of sought after, I want to say. So like violas, violins, obviously they weren't called that back then, but that's what they enjoyed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Fitzwilliam Virginal book. So this is a publication, meaning that it contained, there's just a bunch of English keyboard music dating from the early 17th century. Okay, so we've moved along in history. It was named after it's a guy named Fitzwilliam who donated a lot of money to Cambridge University, which is in England. Okay, so back then, if you were rich and you could sponsor people with your money, you had a lot of things named after you. We'll learn more about that when we get into the Baroque era, because that's largely what they did back then too. Let's see. There's not very important stuff here. Actually, there is. So it included a variety of styles, okay? So this isn't very important, but what is important is that you have to remember the English composers. So there was all English composers from England, okay, that were represented in this publication, such as Thomas Morley, which we like just learned about, Mr. William Byrd, yeah, William Byrd, okay, which we also will learn about in like a couple minutes, okay. Next thing, two things together. Number one, in this book, there was a lot of demonstrations of idiomatic approach to keyboard writing. Okay, if you don't know what idiomatic writing is, it's on page 59 of your textbook in the definition. It means a compositional style that highlights the unique technical capabilities of an instrument. Okay, so for example, like the violin, no, that's a bad example. The trumpet has like a narrower range than the piano. Piano, we got a lot of octaves. Trumpet, there's a little bit less, and it's limited to the power of the player. So idiomatic is when you're highlighting specific characteristics or technical capabilities of individual instruments. And that's basically it. That's all I want to mention for the Fitzwilliam Virginia book. Very important. It was English. It had idiomatic approach to keyboard writing. It included English composers, and it was a virtuosic style of writing. Okay, so virtuosic obviously means, like I said before, very like just high intensity, very ornate, things like that. Ornate means like very extra, but in a good way. Okay, so this is the keyboard music we will learn today. Okay, so it's called the Carman's Whistle. Okay, I was always trying to figure out whether they meant like an actual carman, as in like a car man, but I still have no idea. So the Carman's Whistle, it's a solo keyboard work. So here we're moving past vocal music. So remember, I'm going to tell you this. Renaissance era was defined by a lot of vocal music, but at the same time, a lot of music with different instruments were also beginning to develop, as demonstrated by this piece here, which it was, this used a solo keyboard work. So like if you play the piano, you could play this. Most likely it's pretty easy. Okay, genre. Oh, where is the genres? Where is it? Oh, it's background information. Okay, so page 60 is where we're at. Making good time here, folks. So it was keyboard music. We're largely focusing on the keyboard music. Important thing about this, it has themes and variations. So we're going to listen to the original theme, and then there's different variations. And what I'm going to explain to you is how each variation is different from the original, right? The original like motif and things like that. It's in Ionian mode, C major. Okay, it's in C major. Pretty straightforward there. Source, Fitzwilliam Virginal book. So if they ever ask you which piece was found in the Fitzwilliam Virginal book, you're like, oh, well, it was English, and the Carman's Whistle is one of those, so it must be the Carman's Whistle. Okay, good. So let's listen to the piece. You can follow along with the sheet music, I think. Yeah, you can follow along with the sheet music, and you should play this on your own time as well. Let me just... So this is, oh geez. So that was the original one, and this is the second variation. Okay, so I only played the first two variations, but you should definitely listen to it on your own. Also, it's pretty obvious what changed and what didn't with those pieces. Okay. All right, let's move along. So what I'm going to say is a few things. Let's first talk about the original, okay? So what they first present to us. So right off the top, if you were listening to the recording, you can hear that it starts with just one single hand basically playing the first couple of notes, okay? So it starts like that, and then what the composer does is he continues layering on different notes to create a more dense, a thicker texture, a more dense texture, right? So he just continues layering on notes in the second measure, and then he starts using chords, which obviously makes it a little bit more interesting. If you look at the sheet music too, they have ornaments. Okay, so this is I think yeah, so this is a piece that is pretty much exclusive in the Renaissance era, that with ornaments. So as you can tell, there's a lot of different trills and stuff like that. That was important here. So if they ever ask you about ornaments on the exam, you can name this one, no problem. All right. Okay, that's it. So the variation number 2, which is actually the first variation, but they call it variation 2. What happens is, obviously, first things first, if you look at the sheet music on page 60, there is a sharp, okay, there's F sharp now. So do with that what you will, but it starts to change. So what RCM tells us is that there's syncopation. So this is important. This is like the key word for the variation. So the syncopation in the bass line, and that makes it a little bit more interesting rather than it being very steady throughout. Okay, next, variation number 7. So we're skipping quite a few variations here, okay? So this is more active rhythmic movement. Obviously, if you go on page 60 of your textbook, you see now they're starting to use eighth notes here. They're really going up and down in like a scale-like movement, a lot more movement here, like the book said, okay? And this largely builds like the climactic feeling, I want to say, of this piece, okay? So a lot of really fast movement builds up the energy, builds up the intensity to the final variation with the fullest sound and just the most ornate version of the original, okay? So it starts pretty basic, it gets a little bit more syncopated, then it starts becoming excited, and then it goes really ornate, really thick texture, and just very full sound that people generally enjoy a little bit more. Okay, cool. So, we're almost done. Perfect. Making good time. So this person here is Mr. William Byrd, okay? So what he's known as, he's English, okay? English Renaissance composer. As you can probably tell, we are learning about the Renaissance era. If you can't, then I don't know what you've been doing for the past couple of minutes, for the past hour, okay? The only other very, very important things about him are 2 things. Number 1, in the Fitzwilliam Virginal book here, Virginial book. Okay, sorry, I've been saying it wrong the whole time. So the Fitzwilliam Virginial book, he is represented, okay? So he is one of the only composers in this book that is represented in the Fitzwilliam Virginial book along with Thomas Morley. Okay, so William Byrd, Thomas Morley are in the Fitzwilliam Virginal book. Yeah, and obviously he contributed to the idiomatic keyboard style. This was a keyboard piece, as you can tell. And last thing, he frequently used imitation, okay? So I won't get into that too much, but if they ever ask for a Renaissance composer who frequently used imitation, feel free to jot his name down and you will most likely get the score. Okay, perfect. Are we finished? Yes, okay, we are finished. So page 62 of the textbook, review and reflection. That is for homework. Don't worry, I will post the homework on Google Classroom, and there is still going to be a quiz. I made a Google Forms quiz. It's going to be a little bit less intensive. Obviously it's not going to be as difficult just because I understand it's Christmas and you guys want to relax a little bit, right? Okay, good. So, but the review and reflection will be for homework. Awesome. That being said, we are now on to the Baroque era. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing. Okay, and I will, oops. Okay. So let's learn about the next era and the next couple of pieces. So this is where it gets to, it gets kind of interesting because I'm going to be spending a very long time on one single unit, right? Because here what we have to do is we have to listen to two we have to listen to 3 pieces for one unit in the Baroque era, Okay, so it'll be interesting that way. Let's see if we can do it. Okay, so the Baroque era. By the way, the the dates here, I'm not sure they're very important, but you can memorize them if you want. Yeah, they never quiz you on that because that's pretty straightforward. Okay, awesome. Okay, a lot of things to unpack here with the Baroque era, okay? If you were paying attention in level 9 history, you'll know for some reason Baroque era is named after an oddly shaped pearl. Okay, so this is not just for fun. They didn't do that for fun. It's a metaphor, some say, for the fact that there was a lot of turbulence in the Baroque era. Okay, so there were people who were super duper wealthy, and there were people who were just super duper poor and were living in extreme poverty. And this was largely reflected in the arts and culture of the period, because if you were able to write things like large operas, it was likely because you had a very rich sponsor, or not a sponsor, you had someone paying you to do that, and someone paying you to essentially be their writer for music. So there was a lot of important things here. Dramatic subject matter, vivid colors. Okay, I think here they meant like word painting, things like that. Violent image and a lot of ornamentation, a lot more ornamentation than in the Renaissance era. This was all very present in the Baroque era. By the way, we're on page 64 of the textbook. So let's talk about the elements of musical style in Baroque era. The one thing that's super important is the words basso continuo. That's like a term in and of itself. So it's a performance practice pretty much exclusive to the Baroque era. So it involves two performers, okay? One plays the bass line. So there's a bass line really low. They play it continuously. And one of them realizes the harmonies that goes with the bass line, okay? So if you can see how that goes. Like if the bass line is doing like C, 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 then the other person on top can harmonize that with different variations of the chord of C or things like that, right? Obviously you can think of that on your own. You can visualize that on your own. What else? Okay, there's a lot of things here, but they're mostly related to basso continuo. The other thing I will mention is that there's figured bass notation. So if you know, if you did level 9 or 10 harmony, then you know what figured bass is, okay? So it's basically just numbers placed below the line. Like I think I quizzed someone on this earlier in class for what the definition was, but here you'll get in the Baroque era a more detailed explanation of what exactly it was and like why broadly it's important. Okay, here unlike the Renaissance era, we're going to learn new genres. Okay, so the concerto, we're going to learn that. We're going to learn the opera, the cantata, and the suite, all things that were not present in Renaissance in the Middle Ages. And here's when people started basically abandoning the idea of mainstream sacred music. So they started thinking, let me just write like an opera that isn't about the Bible and that is just about things that I find fascinating and that I will think other people will find fascinating, or that I'm like being paid to do, because that was the reality of the situation. Okay, last thing, the creation of the first operas. If you remember the madrigal, that was the baby for the opera. So this is when the first operas were started to create it. And they popularized a new texture. Okay, so it's called monody, which is very interesting, okay? So it emphasizes outer voices with like, there's a single vocal line replacing what was previously like rich polyphonic lines in the Renaissance era. Okay, good. And this is also when more forms were interested. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say, there were a lot of different forms here. We didn't talk at all about forms in Middle Ages and Renaissance, but in Baroque era, they started thinking like, oh, hey, what if we had like musical forms? So this is when things like binary, rounded binary, ternary form were being developed. Okay, awesome. Anything else? No. Okay, perfect. So let's start with the first unit, which is the opera. Okay, so this, if you don't know what an opera is, you will learn it today, but I'm slightly concerned because opera is super duper mainstream. Okay, like I can guarantee at least one person can name one opera, or at least they know what an opera is broadly. Okay, so the dawning of Baroque era is defined by the birth of a remarkable new genre, the opera. Okay, I say this because the opera, you have to remember, a lot of people make the mistake and think opera is related to the classical era. That is false. We will learn about the classical era later, but opera is the Baroque era. Okay, don't say it's classical. It is very Baroque. Okay. They just say a bunch of other stuff here that isn't important, but we will go into the background and origins right now. So it was invented in Italy in the 1600s, okay? I'm gonna skip that, that's not very important. Okay, so it renewed a new interest in classical antiquity. And we're going to learn 3 operas today. And most of them are largely about Greek mythology, or they're about like kind of Roman, or like, how do I say this? They're about like mythical creatures or like folklore, right? So like if there's the Roman poems about like a certain like creature, a monster, they usually made an opera out of that. Or if you're really keen on Greek mythology, they did a lot of operas about that, which we will be learning about today. Okay, that's basically all I want to talk about. Okay, characteristic features. So if you didn't know, it's very dramatic. It's a drama presented through music. So they're singing quite impressively all throughout, or mostly throughout the entire opera. There's very little talking, and especially in the pieces we will learn today, there's no talking at all. Okay, so obviously, if you didn't know, it combines music with art, literature, theater, dance. There's set pieces, there's costumes, very interesting things like that. Okay, let's move on to the individuals, or the like important things related to the opera. So, Florentine Camerata. This was not a person, it was a group of people. Okay, so we're on page 66 if you're lost. So it was a group of people. Oh, this is the word. The word is patronage. Patronage is when like you get a really rich person who pays you to like write songs, or like pays you to, I don't know, teach them or teach their kids or whatever, how to write music, play music, things like that. So Florentine Camerata, group of people of like poets, musicians, things like that, who basically were credited to create the first operas. They were under the patronage of a guy named Count Giovanni. Don't think that's very important though at all. Let's see. So they started with ancient Greek texts and ancient Greek mythology, which is largely what we'll study today. So it was in Italy. These members you will learn today, these members that they mention here, you won't learn today, so they're not as important, but they talked about a lot of stuff. So if you remember, Renaissance era is when they started developing sciences and stuff like that. So Florentine Camerata was a group of people. They just talked about poetry, they developed operas, music, sciences, and yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, that's all that's very important. Okay, this next one, La Nuove Musique, is way more important than the Florentine Camerata, okay? So they're talking less about it, but it is definitely important. So this is where there was the first first monodic styles were demonstrated. Okay, it was demonstrated in this publication. So it included a bunch of stuff. It included madrigals, arias. If you don't know what an aria, it means like a solo song in an opera. So just one person just singing and expressing themselves on their own, largely without any background music, if that's what we're going to call it. But it just had a lot of things. The very important thing about it was that it featured a lot of monody, okay? If you don't know what that means, it means one song, okay? So monody means one song, and it means like a single vocal melody with simple instrumental accompaniment. So it's very like emotional. It's like a if you know like a lot of English, it's like a yeah, it's basically just like one person singing, very little accompaniment. Different than aria because it's not exclusively featured in operas like aria is. Monody is basically a solo song. Okay. And if you want to look on page 64, I expect you guys to fill this in your glossary, and you can look at the sheet music there. That's not for a piece we will study. It's for a piece featured in Le Nouveau Musique. Okay, cool. So this is when we start learning a little bit about the individual operas that we will study today. So the first one is L'Orfeo by Claudio Monteverdi. Claudio Monteverdi, pretty important person. We will learn a little bit about him like as a composer later on, but they usually quiz you on him, whether in passing or in more detail. That's up to them. Okay, so I won't go into the little description on page 68, but you can read that if you want. I don't think it has much information that you will need. Okay, so L'Orfeo, this is an opera. It's based off of Greek mythology, and basically the rundown, the plot summary here on page 69, it's a little bit long, so I'm going to give you a very shortened version of it. Basically, there's a guy named Orfeo. He falls in love with a girl named Eurydice. They almost get married, but then a snake bites Eurydice and she dies. So then he's very sad. So then Orfeo is like, I want to rescue Eurydice because she's in the underworld, because Greek mythology, when you die, you go to the underworld. So he goes to Hades, which is the guy who runs the underworld, and sings him a song. And Hades is like, oh, wow, that's like so moving. So I'll grant you one wish. And Orfeo is like, I want to bring Eurydice back with me to the alive place, the place where people can live. And the gods are like, sure, just as long as when you walk out of the underworld, you never look back to check if Eurydice is there. So you have to trust that she's behind you, but you just can't know. Like you won't hear her, you just have to trust her. So they continue walking, and then right as he's about to escape the underworld, he looks back. Ooh, that's a Greek myth. Yes, it is. So right as L'Orfeo is just about to reach the overworld, is that what it's called? Like the living people world. He turns back, looks at Eurydice, and obviously he wasn't supposed to do that. So then, boop, they're both sent back to Eurydice is sent back to die, and L'Orfeo is like sad. Yep, that's basically it. You can reread it. The plot summary here, yeah. Oh, here it's different. Apollo takes pity on Orfeo and returns Orfeo to heaven. But Eurydice is still dead in the underworld. So that's pretty sad. Anyways, background information. So it's an Italian opera. Okay, so Claudio Monteverdi, he is an Italian man. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay, he's Italian. This is important. If they sometimes they'll ask you, especially with operas, who the librettist for the opera was. So in this case, it was Alessandro Striggio. Okay. So we're going to learn 3 operas, and in each opera, you will know who the librettist was. So for L'Orfeo, it was Mr. Alessandro Striggio. Source of plot, like Jesse said in the chat, it is Greek mythology. And structure, prologue with 5 acts. We obviously won't learn all 5 acts. Yep, those are the main characters. Not super important at all. That's basically it. Okay, let's start with the first part of this opera, which is the piece Tu sei morta. Okay, so basically Eurydice gets bitten by the deadly snake on the day of her and Orfeo's wedding, and he just gets a message, and the message is like, yo, Eurydice is dead. And he's like, oh, that's so sad. Obviously he's probably more sad than that, but he's very sad, and he's like, I want to get back with my one true love, yada yada yada. Okay, so I'm going to play for you. We have 3 pieces to listen to. Oh, no, only 2 pieces to listen to for this opera. But you will hear this, what I'm going to play for you first here. So there are 2 pieces. This is Tu sei morta. Okay, so it's Orfeo singing it largely, and we'll talk about it later. Oh. Okay, so obviously you can hear he's pretty sad in this piece. But there's a lot of interesting stuff here. So we didn't obviously listen to the whole thing, but if you did listen to the whole thing, you would notice some interesting parts of it that we will talk about, but you may not know because you didn't listen to the whole thing. Okay, so first thing, it's monodic style. Okay, so I just referenced monody in Le Nouveau Musique, I guess, when I was talking about that publication. So this is where the monodic style was super, super evident and is what really defined the opera in the Baroque era. Okay? Yeah, because, yeah, that's all I'm going to say for that. So there is declamatory style of singing, okay? And as you can tell when you're listening to it, you mainly hear his voice. You hear like a little bit of an instrument in the back, but as they say in the textbook, it's a very simple framework of chords. And if you look at the sheet music, you can tell even more that, oh yeah, it's basically just chords that are supporting him and supporting his message, making it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more dark, and a little bit more sad. Okay, nothing else here. Okay, next thing is that continuo. Okay, so the harmonic support is with continuo. So just there are a lot of notes that are just suspended or sustained throughout the entire thing, which makes it a little bit more harmonic, a little bit more not dreadful, but a little bit more sad and dreary. That's the word. Okay. Last thing I will mention, because it's very important in Baroque era, is word painting. Okay. So this is why you should listen to the whole thing, because the examples they mentioned here, the profondi, abisi, and then stelle and sol, they don't even mention that in the first half of the piece. It's in the like back half of the piece, and they don't even mention it in the sheet music. But you should listen to it because those are examples of word painting. My favorite is the last one, the stars and soul, the stelle and sol, which means stars and sun, on page 70, if you're following along. And basically, because like the stars are super high in the sky, sun is super high in the sky, they have really high notes that are emphasizing it. Okay, so that's an example of word painting. Remember, word painting, super important. Okay, so that was Orfeo. That was Orfeo's little piece there, little singing piece. Okay, his recitative. Okay, that's the word I was looking for. So that was him on his own. But a little bit like right after this, right after his part here, the chorus in the opera starts singing and they're echoing his sorrow. They're saying, oh, that's so sad. Let me sing with you. And they're starting to sing. They're starting to be sorrow. They're starting to be like, why is fate like this? Why did fate have to take Eurydice away from L'Orfeo? So this is where you're going to hear not a single person singing with chords, but rather a lot of people singing largely the same thing over and over and over again. Before I play it, yeah, not much here. It's an A minor. I'm sure you can probably notice that when you hear it, but let's listen to it. Okay, that's all I'm going to play, but that's very interesting. Obviously, it's the chorus being sad with Orpheus, and 3 things here. Number 1, it has a homorhythmic and imitative passages that alternate. Okay, you can see that really clearly in the sheet music. Make sure you fill out those definitions so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Second thing, so textual clarity. It's achieved through syllabic setting. Okay, in the homorhythmic sections. So where it alternates, you can see that there is primary syllabic text setting. Third and final thing for this piece is word painting, okay? Because Mr. Monteverdi, I think he did actually like a really good job of word painting. Obviously, he's the master of it. But what he did was for the line "C'è tosto," I can't say that, but the line that says "that soon vanishes," he uses rapid moving 8th notes, obviously, because if it's 8th notes, it'll go a little bit quicker. The sound will vanish a little bit faster. And that's very, that's word painting for you in a nutshell. Okay. And the second thing, the words "after a great ascent" is marked by an upward turn. Okay. So a great ascent, the music is going up, the pitch is going up. That's word painting. Okay, so there's a little blurb at the end of page 71 about how Monteverdi remains true to the text. Obviously, because you have to remember, this opera was not based on what Monteverdi wrote. It's based on a Greek myth that Monteverdi made into an opera. Okay, you don't have to do the reflection, but we will. No, stop, please. Okay, but we'll learn a little bit about Claudio Monteverdi. There's not much that's super important about, well, actually there is, but there's not like a lot of stuff that you have to remember about him. Just remember that he was important because he used a lot of word painting, right? I think I've emphasized that enough. He used chromaticism, word painting, in his madrigals and operas, and then he increased emotional intensity through the use of stile concitato. Okay, if you're not quite sure what that is, it was one of the words to do, but let me find it. It basically means, oh, they don't even have it here. But yeah, he basically just remember that he increased emotional intensity, he used word painting, and he used chromaticism a lot. Okay, and then obviously remember that he's the one who wrote L'Orfeo, the opera. Okay, so opera number 2 that we will study, 2 out of 3, almost there, guys. This is called Dido, and I really don't know how, I should research how to say this, but Dido and A is what I'm going to call it, by Mr. Henry Purcell, that's it, okay? So this is an English opera, and basically it's, yeah, here it is. So it's basically about, I'll get into the plot summary later, but it's quite interesting anyways. The only other thing you have to know is that I talked about the librettist, how important that is when you're learning about the opera. So I'm going to tell you that the librettist for this opera is Nahum Tate, page 73. Okay, Nahum Tate, and it's based on an epic poem by a Roman poet. Okay, all right. So this is basically it's a super convoluted plot in my opinion, but it's basically about a prince whose name is A, and he goes and like across the world and he finds someone who he loves, which is a queen, and then they want to like get married, but then a sorceress doesn't like that they're happy together, so then they basically, okay, wait, yeah, that's exactly it. So A is a prince, he has a mission to fulfill, but he gets sidetracked in the mission when he finds Ditto and he falls in love with her. But then the sorceress convinces A that the gods are unhappy with A for loving Ditto and not fulfilling his mission, which leads to him leaving Ditto, and Ditto's all sad, and then she commits suicide and dies. Okay, cool. Really lighthearted stuff. I'm kidding, but yeah, it's all very dark. So the first piece we will learn is called Ditto's Lament. Okay, or Lament. Ditto's Lament. Yeah. So Ditto's Lament is the scene that we will start learning, but there are three parts to this scene. First one, Thy Hand Belinda. Belinda is the Queen Ditto's like right-hand man, or woman rather, right-hand woman who's like helping her. And basically in the first part, Thy Hand Belinda, Ditto is basically saying, okay, I'm going to die. Okay, and you are going to watch me die, and death will now be my like place where I reside. Things like that. Okay, so important stuff. Key, C major, C minor. Oh geez, key is C minor. Obviously it's minor. This is like a sad piece. It would be very interesting if it was a major, but no, it is minor. Okay, so it's recitativo secco. Okay, and if you don't know what that means, actually there's a bunch of recitativos that you have to study for this for level 10 history. There's basically recitativo secco, and then like wait, let me pull them up. There's recitativo secco, there's recitativo accompagnato, and there's recitativo, there's only two. But yeah, don't get them confused because they largely have the same definition, except for this one is supported only by continuo. Okay, so it's just Belinda, not Belinda, it's just Ditto being very sad, and she's just talking to Belinda. Okay, so yeah, she's preparing herself for death, and the only thing here is word painting. That's very important. So there's a lot of descending vocal lines. Obviously that means something bad's going to happen, darkness, death, things like that. Okay, and don't worry, I'll play the piece momentarily after I finish explaining all three of the sections. Okay, so the second section after Thy Hand Belinda. So if you didn't understand, if what I was saying was a little bit convoluted, Ditto's Lament is the scene, and there are three subsections under the scene. First one is Thy Hand Belinda, second one is When I'm Laid in Earth, and third one is With Drooping Wings. Okay, so second one, When I Am Laid in Earth. Yeah, so basically she's just talking about, when I'm going to die, this is what's going to happen. Please remember it. Okay, so like remember me, but forget my fate, which is quite sad. Okay, so key, G minor, meter, 3/2. I don't think that's even that important in this. But what is important are the three bullet points after that. First, the ground bass is employed. So there's a 5-measure pattern based on a descending chromatic line. Here it's very obvious. If you look at page 74, sheet music, it goes very clearly. It's a chromatic line for the first 3 measures. And it's repeated 11 times. Obviously, we don't see that in the sheet music because we have limited space, but that is it. Yep, that's all I want to say. And then lastly, obviously, we'll focus on word painting now. So descending melisma on laid in earth. Obviously, when you're laying something down, it's going downward. So he does that with the music. And repetition on remember me, because she repeats it a lot, really emphasizes it. Okay, last part with drooping wings. This is basically the chorus, and Ditto, unfortunately, she died, which is very sad. So a bunch of a chorus of Cupids are mourning Ditto because like she was a good person, but something bad happened to her, and he's doing like a eulogy to Queen Ditto. So basically, some key information of this is it becomes really soft. Okay, so it's like angelic after the very like deep things we had to hear, the very like heavy music we had to hear before representing death. So it's in G minor again as a 4-part texture. You can hear that when we listen to it, and it has word painting, descending lines on drooping wings, obviously, because drooping means descending. And that's basically it. Okay, so now we will listen to the, how long is it? It doesn't tell me. It's pretty long, but we will listen to most of it just because I want you to hear the recitativo of Thy Hand Belinda, which is just Ditto singing, and then the aria of Ditto again, and then the chorus singing Oh She Died with drooping wings. Okay. So this is Thy Hand Belinda. So this part here is the When I Am Laid in Earth. Okay, wait, I'm going to skip to... Oops. Okay. So that's basically it. That's her little, the part where she is lamenting, and then obviously she unfortunately dies. Okay, cool. So on a lighter note, let's learn a little bit more about the composer of this opera, which is Henry Purcell. Okay. Honestly, there's not much about him. The only really, really important thing is that he incorporated many elements of Baroque style, obviously, which was not limited to, including but not limited to, major minor tonality, figured bass. Okay, we see a lot of that in this these pieces. Repetition and ornamentation. All right, and he is one of the ones where personally I find he uses the most like obvious use of word painting. Obviously, like for example, drooping wings, he does a descending line to represent like drooping wings, very descending, very sad, things like that. Not much else. He has virtuosic idiomatic writing. Obviously, this is all things you should go through later on your own time, but I will not focus on that too much. Okay, 20 minutes. We have to get through a third opera, okay? This one is by someone you guys likely know, Mr. George Friedrich Handel, okay? And you also probably know who this is about. It's about Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. So if you don't know who they are, okay, but you probably do. If you don't, then you will find out soon enough. So this is basically, I think this is a little bit a more lighthearted piece. It's about like love and how like Caesar and Queen Cleopatra like loved each other, had a love affair, things like that. So background information. This is an opera seria. So if you go to, do they have definitions here? No, they don't even. So it's an opera seria. It's by Handel. And the librettist, I will tell you right away, it's Mr. Nicola Francesco Haim. Okay? Nicola Francesco Haim. And its source of plot, ancient Roman history. So if you don't know, Caesar was Roman. Cleopatra was an Egyptian queen. Caesar was a Roman emperor. And this is basically, we don't know actually what happened because it was so long ago, but I guess this is like a glorification of history with an opera. Okay, so the plot summary. This is the most straightforward. Caesar, he's a emperor, he's a general. He arrives in Egypt and he wants to, he basically talks to Cleopatra because Cleopatra wants to regain the throne of Egypt from her greedy brother. So basically Cleopatra disguises herself as a servant, like goes to Caesar, seduces him, and then with Caesar's support, Cleopatra is able to secure the crown, become the couple, become the queen of Egypt, and then Caesar and Cleopatra celebrate love and the power of love and Cleopatra being able to be queen again. Okay, so that's the plot. Pretty simple, pretty easy to understand. But what we will learn about is Cleopatra's aria. Okay, so it's called Vadoro Pupili. Okay, Vadoro Pupili. Some key information here. It's an F major. It's a aria, so it's in ternary form, meaning it goes A, B, A. You can see the tempo, you can see the meter here, not the most important things here. But what is important is that there are many performing forces, okay? So obviously Cleopatra's character is a soprano, meaning it's the highest like pitch, I guess you could go. But there's also an orchestra with a ton of string instruments and things like that. Okay. Yeah, that's basically it. I think she's talking about how she loves someone, probably Caesar, but let's listen to it and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. Okay, if you want to listen to more of it, you can, but we're like running out of time. So for time's sake, you can search it up on your own, listen to it on your own, and listen to the rest of it on your own. So here, Cleopatra is, so here there's a piano reduction of what would be the orchestral accompaniment for the song. That's basically it. Yeah, there isn't much important here, except it was inspired by a saraband. If you didn't know that, it's a triple meter dance with a prolonged second beat. So we can obviously see that with the sheet music here. Okay, second part of the Vador Pupil section A. Okay. So section A concludes with a brief closing ritornello. If you don't know what the ritornello is, you should definitely search it up, and I think you should also definitely know what it is. And it ends with an authentic cadence. So because it ends with an authentic cadence, it sounds a little bit more final. Okay, it's a very like obvious closing to the first section. No, please stop. Okay, and then we move on to the section 2 of Vador Pupil. So remember, this is Vador Pupil is the piece we're learning, and now we're learning about the different subsections. So this is subsection B. So there's a new key, and it's D minor, which is the relative minor of the initial key, which is F major. Okay, so there's an increase in chromaticism, and it's scored for a small ensemble only. I think that with these, you don't really need to know most of it. You just need to know the keywords. So section B, there was chromaticism, small ensemble, and there's a contrast with the new minor mode. So the relative minor, there's a new contrast. Obviously, there's a totally different like feel to the piece because of the fact that it is minor now. It continues with the later on in the piece with the couple few measures here. Oh, okay, great. So here, there's another mention of recitativo secco, which means dry recitative. I think that's the word, recitative, not too sure. But that means that it's like a speech-like kind of singing. So I think Caesar here is interrupting Cleopatra, which kind of gives the audience like a little nudge that, hey, Cleopatra's plan is succeeding, because remember, Cleopatra wants to seduce Caesar for her own personal gain. Okay, and then finally, the last section is da capo, because if you remember, they said that the form of Vadoro Pupili is ternary, ABA. So we learned section A, there's section B, now we're going back to section A, okay? And the only difference here is that there's way more embellishment, way more ornamentation than the first part, and there's an improvised cadenza. So I think this is one of the only pieces that really mentions improvisation in the Baroque era. So remember that can be important. And it's just a little bit more ornamented, a little bit more interesting because it's the ending. Okay, that being said, we don't have enough time to start the cantata. If you want to read ahead, feel free to. But on that note, I will stop sharing and I will just really quickly tell you guys what the homework is going to be. So I understand it's Christmas on the 25th. If you celebrate Christmas, then that's amazing. If you don't, then that is also amazing. So basically what we are going to do for homework is that I made a quiz for you guys on the first two parts of the textbook, okay? And by parts, I mean the eras, so the Middle Ages and the Renaissance era. I'm not going to quiz you on the opera for the Baroque era yet, just because I'd rather do it like all together, everything in the Baroque era at once, but it's a pretty simple quiz, and it's about wait, let me share it with you guys, just so you guys can see what it is. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so, and there's also no essay for it, okay? Because I don't want you guys to write an essay like during Christmas time and stuff like that. So there's 20 questions. 5 of them are about, you choose like the era it's related to. For example, I won't give you the answer, but the first question is, representative composers include Thomas Morley and William Byrd. So you have to think, did we learn that in the Renaissance era or is it in the Middle Ages? Okay, so things like that. There's 5 of those questions. Section 2 is definitions. So I either give you the definition here or I give you the word, okay, or the words. So da capo aria. You have to tell me what the definition is and which piece it's related to. Try to have the most in-depth explanation possible, because you want to cover all bases of the word, of the definition of the word, because on the exam, I guarantee like they will not tell you the most like obvious definition of the word. They'll always quiz you on like the part that you didn't really think was as important, but they'll always mention that. Okay, good. And then the last composer is 10 questions about composers, individuals, or publications. So we learned a lot about them. Okay, we learned a bunch of composers. I think we learned like 6 or 7. We learned like William Byrd. We learned Thomas Morley. We learned like Léonin Perrotin, Notre Dame School, Pope Gregory. We learned the Guillaume de Machaut, things like that. I'm going to quiz you on those. Okay, so for example, this one pretty easy if you were paying attention for the past couple minutes, but it is, this composer used nonsense syllables and easily singable melodies in his madrigals. So you're going to think in your head, you're going to think, which composer did that? And then you're going to write it down. Okay. And then next, I'm going to quiz you on like treaties, things like that, all that kind of stuff. No essay for now, just because I don't want you guys to be too stressed out. Okay. Along with that, homework will also include, I will post this on the Google Classroom, but homework will also include filling out the page. Yeah, filling out the page, let me check what it is, page 62 for the Renaissance era, okay? Because I don't want you guys forgetting about the Renaissance era, because we did it with the Baroque era. You have to remember it. You have to fill out page 62. And last but not least, the last thing I'll get you guys to do is you have to finish writing all the definitions for every single word in the glossary. Okay, no exceptions. Have every single one of them written down and